Congress is back in session, and Democrats are putting a heavy emphasis on potential gun control legislation. But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he won't budge on any bill without approval from the president. Natalie Brand has more from Capitol Hill.
President Trump and the Attorney General honored the bravery of police and civilians who responded in the immediate aftermath of the mass shootings in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio last month.
They stared down death to protect the innocent and stand tall they did just for righteous and for good.
Later, a bipartisan group of mayors from across the country met with White House officials to discuss ways to prevent mass shootings, including Dayton Mayor Nan Whaley.
You've got to start with universal background checks. The American people agree with it, so it is an action that will save lives.
Whaley also joined Democrats on Capitol Hill to demand the Senate take up the universal background checks bill the House has already passed.
Too many Americans are losing their lives to gun violence.
Democrats and Republicans have been discussing gun safety ideas with the president's team for weeks now. The White House is expected to release its own legislative proposal, but it's still unclear when.
We are talking about a lot of different things, but at the same time, we have to protect our Second Amendment very strongly.
Whaley says she's hopeful Congress will act, but says she won't be surprised if it doesn't.
I don't think that Americans are going to forget, and so hopefully they'll get that message to actually take action now rather than later.
In a radio interview last week, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said he'd bring gun safety legislation to the Senate floor as long as it has the president's support. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Sheryl Stolberg is a congressional correspondent for the New York Times. She joins me now from Capitol Hill. Great to see you, Sheryl. Thanks so much for being with us.
Happy to be here.
Is there actually room here for compromise from Democrats on gun control, or will they demand the House bill?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. You know, in 2013, the Senate took up a background checks bill, the so-called Manchin-Toomey bill, named for two senators, Joe Manchin and Pat Toomey, and it failed on a Senate filibuster. It is possible that Democrats would go for that bill. That is a little bit less expansive than the House-passed bill. The House-passed bill does not include any exceptions for gun sales between families and friends, and the Manchin-Toomey bill does. So, you know, we'll have to see. I think, frankly, the key person in this whole debate is President Trump, because the question is, what will President Trump go for? Mitch McConnell, as you heard him say, will not put anything on the Senate floor unless he is confident that the president is going to sign it into law if it passes. So that's really who we're waiting for.
So a Washington Post poll shows a majority of Americans support some kind of gun control measure. Do Democrats, though, at least feel that maybe something is shifting or has shifted when it comes to public sentiment on this issue of guns?
I think something absolutely has shifted. I spent a lot of last week in Texas, in the district of the lone Democrat, the sole Democrat in Texas who still has an A rating from the National Rifle Association. And there are only 3 Democrats in the House who have that A rating. And this Democrat, Henry Cuellar, who I spent time with, voted for the background checks bill. He's going to lose that A rating, almost certainly. So something really is shifting, not only among Democrats, but also among Republicans, especially Republicans who have had mass shootings in their districts. We saw Representative Mike Turner of Ohio, who represents Dayton, come out in favor of an assault weapons ban, a Republican. Another Republican, Brian Mast, out of Florida, also came out for an assault weapons ban. This is like unheard of in the Republican Party. So things really are shifting here on Capitol Hill and around the country.
So what about Senate Republicans? I mean, realistically, you mentioned Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is looking to President Trump right before deciding whether or not to take any action. But is he going to be facing, is the Senate Majority Leader going to be facing any pressure from Senate Republicans for legislation?
He may be facing some pressure from some Republicans who are in tough races. I don't know, because they have been gone, you know, for 5 weeks, where Republicans like Cory Gardner, who's in a tough race in Colorado, or Tom Tillis, who's in a tough race in North Carolina, or Martha McSally, who's in a tough race in Arizona, where they stand on some of these background checks bills. We will learn more when they come back in tonight and probably tomorrow. So McConnell may face some pressure from folks like that. And those people also will be looking to President Trump to kind of give them cover
right.
With their fellow Republicans.
Right. Nobody wants to be out there and then have the president change his mind, as has happened before. I want to turn.
He's very good at that.
Never a dull moment, right, Sheryl? I want to turn to the idea of a possible impeachment inquiry. The House Judiciary Committee outlined parameters for a possible impeachment inquiry into President Trump. What does it look like, and why is Chairman Jerry Nadler taking this step?
Well, first of all, more than half the House Democrats now support an impeachment inquiry. So that's, a critical threshold to have passed. I think the issue of whether or not the House Democrats should have an impeachment inquiry is frankly already settled. The question now is, what will it look like? And we're seeing a push from some Democrats like Jamie Raskin on the Judiciary Committee to make it really pretty expansive, to include investigation of whether or not the president violated the emoluments clause of the Constitution. That's the clause that prevents him from taking money from foreign governments, in this case, money at his hotels. Looking possibly at whether the hush money payments that the president's campaign made to Stormy Daniels, a woman with whom Mr. Trump was said to have an affair. So these kinds of issues are really going to go, frankly, far beyond the initial scope of the Mueller inquiry, which was looking at whether or not the president aided Russia in interfering with the 2016 election.
And finally, Sheryl, in our last minute that we have left, what else does Congress have to do as opposed to what it likely will do in the next few weeks?
Well, it has to do the one thing that it's supposed to do under the Constitution, which is keep the government running. We're running up against the deadline. The end of the fiscal year is at the end of September, and once again, Congress has not passed its spending bills. There are fears now of another shutdown. I'm sure you remember that ugly shutdown that was underway earlier this year when Democrats first took over the House. Nobody wants that to happen again. But there are going to be a lot of spending fights, not least of which will be over the president's decision to shift money from military construction projects to the border wall. So you're going to see a lot of hollering about spending over the next few weeks up here.
All right, a very busy time. Sheryl Stolberg, great to have your insight. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.